Coming Soon Reviews. This is a show where, once a week, I will be reviewing a major wide-release film and going over both positives and the negatives for the film, as well as giving my overall impression. So, without any further ado, let's get in with this week's review of The Expendables 3. Alright, to start off with the positives. This film, surprisingly, is the most entertaining and enjoyable of the three. Now, to a certain degree, that's not saying a lot, because the first one took itself way too seriously, and the second one went, I think, a little too goofball, which is kind of what we wanted, but I think with the second one, it went a little too far with it. This third one kind of finds that right balance in between those two films, where it does have the serious aspects of the storyline, but it is still inherently goofy and still funny and really kind of... The stakes are very big, but there is still a lightheartedness to certain elements of the film, which is what the first one was missing and the second one had too much of. So they really did find a good balance. By far, the standouts in this movie are Antonio Banderas, who is just... He is hilarious in every single scene he is in. Wesley Snipes, surprisingly, is actually one of the standouts in this movie because he's a little off. He's been in solitary confinement in prison in the film for about 8 years. Very reminiscent to his real life stakes, which I really found was funny, because even in the film, this isn't really a spoiler because it doesn't affect the film, but when they ask him, what were you in there for, he goes, tax evasion. Just like he was in real life. Now, he obviously in real life did not go to jail for that long. He was not in solitary confinement, but just the fact that he was there during that time, or doing the time for the same reasons, I thought it was a nice little play. But most importantly, out of anybody, Mel Gibson is a phenomenal villain in this movie. He is by far the best villain they've had. Jean-Claude Van Damme chewed too much scenery to the point where he almost threw it back up in number 2. Number 1, we didn't really get a good bad guy. There was the CIA dude who was kind of the overseer, but he wasn't really a bad guy in terms of being malevolent and all this kind of stuff. He was just... Like, yeah, he shot somebody if they needed it, but outside of that, he didn't do a whole lot. And then the general, or the cartel leader, whoever it was, I'm not even remembering most of the first one, he ended up having a change of heart throughout the film, so he wasn't even really all that bad. This movie, no, he is the big bad. He actually was, and they explain this in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, he actually was one of the original Expendables, one of the first guys that started this group. And... because he went off on his own and decided to become kind of like an arms dealer, they cut ties with each other, and he became an enemy of the Expendables. And they actually believed him to be dead, and it turns out that he wasn't. It definitely has the best action sequences out of all of the three films. The funny thing is, and most of the people who have already seen the film have been talking about this, the fact that this movie has more deaths on screen than the first two movies combined, and this movie got a PG-13 rating. Now, there are certain circumstances where a PG-13 rating and violence go hand in hand. You have a lot of films which have a lot of on-screen death. Just as long as you don't show blood, you don't show any nudity, and you don't swear, at least just using the F word. As long as you can use anything else, really, except for the F word, several times in a PG-13 movie, and they'll let you get away with it. The rating system on a whole realistically needs to be changed, because it's the one thing, I posted a tweet and a Facebook post about this a couple of weeks ago about how Expendables 3 gets a PG-13 rating and has easily over 1,000 people die on screen. Then you have a movie like Boyhood, which is a movie about a kid growing up, and it's rated R. Like, to me, that's just ridiculous. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. But yeah, I mean, the ending action sequence in this film, which you've seen a lot of in the trailers, you just haven't seen the amount of guys they have to mow through. It's insane. But yeah, they kill... I almost think that even in the third act of the film, not even in just this film in general, I think in the third act, in that last big 30 to 35 minute action sequence, that they kill more people in that scene than they have in the entire first two movies combined. It's ridiculous how many people they mow down. And it reminded me of the 80s, because they would they would point their guns and go, and they would mow down like 18 guys. You look at movies now and they go, and they don't even hit anybody. And that's realistically how it most likely would be. I mean, you could even be aiming at a guy and still not hit him. But again, I'm getting off topic. But the main thing that I liked about this movie, and I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. I may not have even thought it was good. It was okay. It definitely was the best of the three. But the main thing that got me excited about this film was the fact that it gets me now excited for the Raid remake, which is a movie that there are certain aspects to it that I'm excited about, and there are certain things that I'm apprehensive about because the Raid is one of the coolest movies ever made, and the Raid 2 is one of the best movies of 2014. That movie is unbelievably amazing. Just the character level, the depth of the characters, the fight sequences and choreography and how they fit into the story. They are not there, and the story just kind of leads you to it. No, the storyline is through and through, and the action sequences are sprinkled throughout the movie, but they fit into the storyline. This movie kind of does the opposite. The action sequences serve the story serves the action sequences. But Patrick Hughes, who directed the Expendables 3, is signed on to direct the Raid remake, and he actually just gave a pretty in-depth interview the other day, where he talked about how whoever signs on, he did confirm that Frank Grillo is a part of the film, even though the studio has not officially announced it. He is officially a part of it. He would not comment on whether or not Taylor Kitsch was involved. He did say that all of that stuff is coming together, but he can't talk about any casting until it's finalized and officially announced by the studio. But he did say that they are hoping to start shooting by the beginning of next year, hopefully, as long as they get the casting done within the next couple of weeks, because he wants each cast member to go through 6 months of training. That to me is a really good instigator for this film potentially being great. Now, whether or not it's going to be using the Raid's kind of synopsis while adhering more to a gunfight than it is to a fist fight, I hope they don't go that route. I hope they still keep the martial arts aspect intact, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited that Frank Grillo's in the movie, because the dude is an accomplished martial artist. But the fact remains that they're going to go through 6 months of actual training. It's not going to mainly be their stunt doubles, which is what he said about this film. He said he wanted to do as much of it in camera with those actors as he could, which meant there were a lot of times where they did not use stunt doubles. There were obviously times where they had to, but for the most part they didn't need to, which I thought was really cool. So those are my positives, and I'm going to get into my negatives. So the one thing that really started to hit me with this film, it feels like there's just forcing 80s action stars together. Nothing overly exciting about the film. Like there's sequences in the movie where an 80s action star will come in and they're just kind of there because they're on the list of 80s action stars and they need to be put in. These movies now seem to be made more so just to get these people on screen together again, not because they have a really interesting action idea that would service these guys really well. It just, we got to do another geriatric action stars movie, so let's just get all these guys together and we'll figure it out all later. Harrison Ford, for instance, was just a throwaway role. The role was originally supposed to go to Bruce Willis, who was supposed to return as Church, but he and Stallone had a big falling out. Presumably it was over contract demands, increasing, or it was either increasing or decreasing his role and also increasing his pay. I think it had to deal with decreasing his role but increasing his pay. And so they got Ford to come in and replace him. And you can literally see that in the original script, all they did was they added a little header and footnote, and that was it. They kept the original lines in there because you could tell it's actually coming from Church, but then he just says, yeah, Church is out, I'm in, deal with it. That's almost verbatim what he says. Ronda Rousey, as amazingly talented of a fighter that she is, and she is actually quite beautiful as well, she is an awful, awful, awful actress. Holy God, was she bad. Just the line deliveries are so bad. Like a high school student would do better who doesn't even have a drama class on his schedule. One of the biggest things too, it needed more Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson was in it a fair amount. He was just kind of sprinkled through. But I personally felt we needed more of his characters because his character was so fascinating. And also you could tell he was having the time of his life filming this movie. And I would have loved to have the movie start off with an opening sequence that showcased the first Expendables team. Because they say it's been, 8 years, 10 years since they were last together. That to me means they wouldn't have to do a whole lot in terms of de-aging these guys because they would still be in their 50s. And you could have included people like Kurt Russell in just a cameo role, and Jackie Chan in a cameo role. You know, explaining why these guys have not been a part of the series as of yet. You know, or even have Chuck Norris come back in another little cameo at the beginning. Having little things like that would, I think, have been cool. A lot of people have been mentioning they're waiting to see Steven Seagal be in the movie. Not going to happen. He absolutely loathes Sylvester Stallone. They hate each other with a passion. That is not going to happen. And also, one thing I talked about earlier was about the rating and how they were able to get away with all the killings and stuff like that with a PG-13 rating. But you can see where the movie originally was rated R, and that they had to cut it down to be PG-13. Because specifically, usually you can tell with shot composition whether or not there's going to be an edit. You know, it's like in a movie where you can tell that there's going to be something that's been CG'd behind them to either jump out or attack them or something like that. The lighting changes, something happens, and you know that the camera's going to cut away right as soon as something happens. Well, there's specifically one shot in the movie. Antonio Banderas is fighting a whole bunch of these guys, and he goes to shoot a guy in the head. And you could tell just by the camera angle and everything that was happening that you were supposed to see him get shot, and then he was going to roll up and continue doing something. But they cut away just before he pulls the trigger, and then you could hear the gunshot in like the distance from another angle. So, I mean, that part really got to me because it's like, okay, well, I can understand you needing to cut down the movie to get a PG-13 rating to get more people involved in seeing the film, but if you originally made it R and you weren't even able to, you shot scenes with the intention of having it be rated R. To me, it's just a little odd that they did that without at least shooting. Because what most movies do in this situation where they think it could go either way, they will shoot a PG-13 and an R take. And then they will, throughout the course of the film and editing, and the studios and distributors will come in and talk about whether or not they're going to market it as R-rated or as PG-13 or whatever the case may be. But this case, no, they went for an R, and the studio then came and said, no, you got to cut it down to PG-13, so they re-edited it. For the most part, it doesn't affect the film at all. It was just certain times throughout the movie I could tell where they cut it, and they did not have the foresight to think that that would maybe be a possibility. Even though the second one almost went PG-13 over the request of Chuck Norris. But yeah, I mean, there were certain elements of the movie that I just wasn't really engaged in, but it could just be, you know, franchise fatigue. As I said, like, my overall score is going to be a 6 out of 10. I do feel that this movie should have been better. It could have been better. It just wasn't. It was, however, the best Expendables movie that has come out by far. But again, my overall statement is, overall, I felt it just simply wasn't needed. We didn't need this film. I had fun with it, but I am getting tired of this franchise, which is something I never thought that I would say. And if they do another one, which they're probably going to, if this film is a success, which, judging by the fact that the film was leaked online, I don't know how much of a success it was. I am glad that that there are people out there who are willing to go and pay to see the movie. But because again, if you like this movie and you want to see more movies like this, or you care to see more movies in the vein of this that are just fun, action oriented, or even just films in general, you need to go and pay to see them. Because the more people torrent and do not go and financially support these movies, the less these movies will get made. They just won't. Why do you think studios now are only doing adaptations? They are only going after established stories, whether it be books, television shows turning into movies, or remakes and sequels of already existing films, is because people have already shown that if it's a new property, they're going to download it first to see whether or not they like it. And if they do like it, well, they've already got it downloaded, so they're not going to go and see it. Well, the studio looks at that and says, it cost, you know, $60 million to make this movie, and worldwide it made 48. That means they're not going to, that studio's not going to not only make a sequel to that movie, they're not going to do that. Other studios will look at that and say, okay, this original piece did not do well. It was not from an already established story. It was not from a novel. It was not from anything. No one went and saw it. We're not going to move forward with any of the other projects that are not based on already existing properties. And that's what's going to happen. That's why now we're getting this slew of superhero movies and sequels. That's all we're going to be getting for the most part for the next, 5-6 years at least. And it's because people just don't go to the movies and support these films. I mean, they're not saying go to IMAX. You don't need to go to IMAX. If there's a non-3D version of the film, you don't need to go and see 3D. Go and see it the cheapest way that you can. But you still need to support it because the studios need to know whether or not this is a film that you want to see more of, or more types of films like that. If not, we're just going to keep getting Transformers 4 all over again, which is a horrible, horrible movie. I've seen it. I saw it twice. And once I saw it the first time, I lied to myself and I said that, you know what, it had redeeming qualities. When I saw it the second time, it is a god-awful, terrible film. And you know what? It's the only movie this year to make $1 billion worldwide. People are flying out to go and see this movie. And it's terrible. Yet you get a movie like Edge of Tomorrow, which almost bombed at the box office. I think it actually made money in its worldwide total, but I don't even think it cracked 100 million domestically, and it was a $150 million movie plus marketing. So, I mean, it's sad that it's gotten to this point where studios are now having to just kind of retread out the same stuff because it's the only thing people are going to see. And if you want original content, you need to support that original content. I'm done with my rant. So my overall score of this film is a 6 out of 10. I did feel that it could have done better. It was still entertaining. If you like mindless action films, it is that in a nutshell. It tried to ham-fist in this new team that didn't really work for me. The techie guy on it, actor named Glenn Powell. I thought that he was pretty good, and Cullen Lutz was pretty good in his role, but the other two, Victor Ortiz, no, he was terrible. Ronda Rousey, terrible. Again, great fighters, great action scenes with them, and Ronda Rousey is pretty decent to look at. She's actually pretty hot, especially in the first scene when you see her as the bouncer in that bar in that red dress. But outside of that, she's horrible. So yeah, this has been my review of Expendables 3. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie in the comment section below, or even on my Facebook page. But don't forget to click subscribe there in the bottom corner. You can get updates whenever we post a new video. You can follow me on Twitter at Niklsun, Niklsun, for all of your movie updates. And you can also find me on my Facebook page at facebook.com/movienewswithniklsun. And until next time, you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.